Today we are joined by Len Pienaar. He is a mechanical engineer who then established a very interesting career path where he went from being a mechanical engineer to Sasol, and then he landed up in the mobile technology world, and he spent some time at Cell C, where he was part of the founding team of Cell C, and he was at MTN before that. And then he joined the fintech environment at FNB. And he had an interesting time there too, because he was a member of the innovative eBucks loyalty program as part of the First Rand group, MTN, and FNB's sort of loyalty scheme that's rested in technology. So then Len had various other career paths. He was at Clickatel, which is a very big South African success story, now headquartered in Silicon Valley, I believe. And he then went back to FNB, where he was instrumental in creating the FNB Connect product, which is a dedicated business unit within FNB. And it's one of the first virtual mobile network operators in the world, in fact. And recently, Len joined Media24 in the role of CEO of Media24 Digital. So it's a pleasure to welcome you for our interview, Len, about the practical impact of the fourth industrial revolution. So let's just talk about your career path, because some of the questions I'll be asking deals with education and careers within the fourth industrial revolution, or 4IR. You started as a mechanical engineer. How did you land up where you are today?
I think I was fortunate that the people who taught me always focused on teaching how to think rather than what to do. And that helped me to adapt to many different industries, because normally there's problems to solve and there's ways and means to find solutions for it.
Okay, so if you were to think about your younger self today, and if you were to give your younger self some advice today within the an enormous change wrought by the fourth industrial revolution in society, in education, in just everything that we do, what would you tell yourself now, looking forward, how to prepare yourself as a young person for a career within the fourth industrial revolution?
I think it hasn't changed much for me. I would still make sure that I rather study something that teaches me how to approach things than to prepare me for a specific job or career. I think when I left university as a mechanical engineer, there was very narrow paths defined for me. And it's only once you start to meet people outside those paths that you realize that what you have been taught can be applied virtually in any industry.
Is that what you found in your own career?
I think there's probably limitations about highly narrow roles like a doctor. I wouldn't attempt to become a doctor with a mechanical engineering degree. But apart from those few narrow verticals, I really believe that with the right approach to thinking and problem solving, any degree can be used in any career path.
There's a lot of talk about the so-called STEM education in the fourth industrial revolution, and that refers to science, technology, engineering, and maths. So do you agree that, from your perspective, that if you study one of the STEM subjects, that you'll be able to apply that virtually anywhere else?
Definitely, but I don't think it's limited to those subjects. I've worked with amazing people who've studied humanities and even arts degrees. Again, I think it's about approach to life rather than the skills you taught at university. And I think if you look at many successful business people today, they're not engineers or they're not accountants. but they actually have a classic training in either languages or other humanity skills.
Yeah, that's true. I think the late Steve Jobs was a very big advocate of that kind of approach. He saw the world, I imagine, from a human perspective.
Yeah, and I think those science degrees just expose you to working with technology earlier on. And I think that's more important for me today, is that you familiarize yourself and you get used to working with different technologies that changes frequently, that you don't get stuck in one skill set or one career or one industry. I think whatever you do today, there's a high likelihood in 3 to 5 years that it's not going to be the same anymore.
That's an interesting topic. So a lot of people are, I suppose, scared of that rapid change. How do you feel about that?
I think that any change will create new opportunities. And that as long as you make sure that your skills are not tied to any specific thing, there's always more opportunities going forward than there was in the past. And I think especially young people need to ensure that they can follow those opportunities rather than becoming highly skilled in a specific technology or knowledge base. And I think going forward, that's going to be more important than ever before.
Why do you say that?
I think the pace of change has increased, but also the pace of obsolescence. I'm not sure if that's the right word.
Yes, it is.
If we look at how many industries die in a very short time today, why historically, if we think about video shops, that was a 20 years demise. I think what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years is a lot of historical industries going through a very rapid decrease in both revenue and profits. So whatever you do today, I would make sure that I have 2 or 3 other things that I'm interested in and can prepare yourself for moving into a new field.
As CEO of Media24 Digital, I suppose that you're within that specific environment right now, where the traditional media are being impacted in a massive way right now.
Yes, but I think it is probably one of the most exciting eras for journalism, just in terms of the reach and scale journalists have now that we've never had before. So today we can literally tell a story about and to everyone because mobile phones are so prevalent in our society. Where even 10 years ago, it was a privilege to be able to buy a newspaper. Today, to read a story of a world-renowned journalist is within everyone's reach, and mostly it's free.
Isn't that the problem, though, that it is free?
Nothing in life is really free. There's always business models underlying free products. Yes. So current journalism is sponsored by advertising, but I think going forward, and it's basically a full circle we've come. If you think about the original newspapers, you paid, you bought one from the street vendor, and there were a little bit of advertising. The pendulum has swung to only advertising. But I think going forward, we're going to see a combination of people paying for news and advertisers sponsoring news, or not sponsoring news, paying for views on a screen where news is read by other people. But again, I think that's what making this revolution so interesting, is that it's both new and historical business models that plays out at the same time. Okay. And what makes businesses survive is not trying to hang on to one model at the cost of another.
Okay, that sounds really interesting from a practical point of view, because that is what we are trying to delve into today, is the long-term practical impact of the fourth industrial revolution for the University of Johannesburg, or UJ, community that will that will find this really interesting is at the university, the aim is to position UJ certainly as one of the universities at the forefront of the thinking about the fourth industrial revolution. And one of the aspects of 4IR is certainly mobile. You mentioned mobile quite a bit. You've got a lot of experience personally in the mobile world. Where do you see the mobile world going? A lot of people say that certainly the handsets have sort of reached a point where nothing much changes from a new handset release to the next. What's your view on where mobile is going?
Sure. I think with the introduction of 5G, but also with just the prevalence of the older mobile technology networks, that mobile will become part and parcel of everything you do in life. And I think handsets will always be around, but you're going to have so many things that you don't even know is connected at any time, that mobile will really just become part of your life. If you think today, many of us have a laptop, a handset, a watch, a fitness device, a GPS, all of that is seamlessly connected in your name, and often you don't even think about those devices anymore. So I think mobile is going to bring us a world where you will be unaware of being connected continuously. And there's entire new worlds opening up. Just if you think healthcare, security, we'll have to come up with new business models and new products that allows people to access these things without having been taught how to do it. And I think the big breakthrough in this new world we're going into is that the products and devices will have to be so easy to use that people will become unaware of actually using these devices.
Is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing?
I think everything that we can design or implement has pros and cons. And often the negative side of it is more around how society uses them than what we actually take to market. And I think it's our responsibility as business leaders and part of the community is to make sure that, and it's not technology, it's basically anything we can build, is that we make sure that the good part of it outweighs the negative impact in society. But often that negative impact is more associated with the change it introduced than actually what it can do for society.
Yeah, that's a how can I put it, a super important topic, because there is a certain level of fear of the providers of technology. In this instance, I'm referring to 5G. Let's say a certain company provides a whole lot of components in the 5G environment, and then governments and security entities are then afraid that the provider of that technology can spy on individuals and companies and things like that. How do you feel about that?
Sure. I believe that personal privacy is sacrosanct and that it should always carry more weight than the ability to intercept. That on its own can be controversial. But people should be able to choose to not be monitored. How that plays out going forward is, again, we need to decide how we want governments to write laws that governs this. But this is not new. That happened even in the first telecommunication system that was analog. Governments had the ability to do that.
That's true.
And probably intercepting letters that was written. Government still had the ability to do it. I think the difference now is scale. It can be done at a scale that's unprecedented. But again, it's our responsibility to make sure that the laws around, and it's not technology, but how society uses it and governments have access to it, needs to be written well. And it's not the technology, it's how we choose to deploy and use it.
So I suppose society, including governments and civil society, then therefore are also challenged by the fourth industrial revolution because of the rapid change. So in the past, perhaps the law was written and it stayed the same for a very long period of time. And now, due to certain technological advances, these laws are struggling to catch up.
Look, and I think that's the big thing that we have to get right in this new age, is where things used to have a cycle of 5 years. I don't know if you remember when 5G was first discussed, was like 7-8 years ago. We're not going to have the luxury of these 5-10 year cycles. And I think both society and governments have to learn how to write laws in a world that changes much quicker than anything we've ever seen in the past. And our laws will have to become technology neutral to allow for such rapid change.
Sure. Yeah, that's a heavy topic. Just on a little bit of a lighter note, have you experienced 5G yourself yet?
Only once.
Okay.
But the speed is not so much what makes it amazing for me. It's the ability to deal with millions of devices at the same time that really excites me. Because I think even at 4G speeds, there's very few things that 5G will offer you that you can't do on 4G. But the ability to connect 500 devices in each house, or have continuous device connection for something that's truly mobile, is really what excites me. Imagine that anything you put in your house will declare itself and you can start using it in an intelligent way. And I think that's going to build business opportunities that we've only dreamt of in the past.
So that's an important insight, because you only read about the speed. You know, this is a very interesting aspect of 5G that you mentioned. So if I can sort of repeat what you said in for me, in an understandable way. So 5G's difference is the amount of simultaneous things that can be on that network at a single moment without compromising speed. And that ability 4G doesn't have.
I think that's elegantly put. So 5G will literally allow us to put a chip in anything we build, and that device or object can connect to the network. So everything that you buy and put in your house can actually become connected. Every part in your car, for instance, can become connected to this network. So today, where it's very expensive to buy a phone and connect it, in the future we could buy very low-cost objects, put it in our house to monitor water leaks in your geyser, and that thing will be always on. And I think we will have to go and rethink about everything we make, what connectivity can be built into that, or everything we use.
Sure. So an unconnected device in future is a connected device.
I'm not sure if it's backward compatible, but anything we build going forward could be a connected device.
Do you see that in manufacturing? So let's say Silicon Valley type cars like a Tesla or a car like that, will that be already in those cars that they build?
Yeah, look, I think all modern cars already have a degree of connectivity, but it doesn't just have to be the car. Even the individual parts can have connectivity now, that a manufacturer can monitor its performance, that it can understand the loads that it receives, etc. And this is not just high-tech stuff. It's basic stuff like utensils we use in the kitchen can be connected. And on a simple way, it can warn you when it goes faulty.
Yes.
So it can prevent fires, etc. That opens a whole new world for manufacturing that we, even a year ago, wasn't financially viable.
Sure.
But
So
it will always take longer to become part of our life than what we think.
yeah.
But the impact will be much more than we ever anticipated.
Now, you read my mind there, because that's what I wanted to ask. We read about it, people talk about it, and then the normal person, walking down the street doesn't experience it yet until one day when they do. And some of it, as you've mentioned before, may come in sort of surreptitiously. You don't really know that the new toaster that you've installed has got a way in which it can connect to your Wi-Fi network or your 5G network.
And look, and I think when you ask, like, what would I prepare myself for if I study now, is I think people who figure out how to bring these new businesses and devices into everyday life is where the next big businesses are going to come from. So not so much designing those devices, but making it in such a way that it's easy to use and nearly in the background.
That's sort of,
and the day of user manuals is long gone. So
yeah.
if you ever have to build something that you have to explain to someone to use, it's not going to be successful.
Now, that's also a very interesting topic that you mentioned, because part of the fourth industrial revolution then could be, in a practical sense, things that just work, that you basically switch on and it's just there and the user can immediately start using it. Or sometimes you just switch it on and you don't even know that much about what it does.
Yeah. So many devices will come out without an on and off button, which is kind of weird for classical design thinking. But the device of the future there won't be a place for it not to be on. You will not be able to switch these devices off because they're part and parcel of the cloud. They actually won't be able to function if they're not connected.
Wow, that is amazing in a practical sense, because maybe it's my age, but that is something I'm not personally really used to, and I think a lot of people are used to switching things on actively. What you are saying is the default state is on, and that's it.
Yeah, and many of these devices won't have an off stage. They can only be online. And we have to think about how do we build business models that support that type of environments, where you can't charge people for access anymore, but you have to make money through the services you provide to people in these worlds.
So is that called value-added services? So could it be that, I'm just thinking, it's a very interesting discussion on a practical level. So I'm just thinking, I buy the toaster and it could be that I get the toaster for free, possibly, but that I share some data with the toaster manufacturer. I allow it to monitor something. And in that way, I pay for some sort of undefined service that the toaster maker then resells to somebody else. And in that way, there's some business model there. Or doesn't that make any sense?
Look, and I think that is what makes the world exciting but difficult, is that companies will come up with new business models that could make your core product, which is building toasters, non-existing. So we continuously have to go and understand what competitors do in terms of their new business model and make sure that the business model we rely on is still relevant going forward. And I'm struggling to comprehend what a toaster can do. But if you think a watch, like no one buys a watch today for the time.
No.
The watches we buy today actually is a health device that measures your position, activity, heart rate. And if you spoke to a watchmaker 10 years ago and said, like, the product you sell, which is what is the time, will be absolute in 10 years, I think very few people would have believed you. But today, people don't go and ask, how accurate is my new iWatch? I don't think people even realize that that is a time device. But it's completely replaced the entire industry in 5 years.
Absolutely. That's so interesting because
You
that,
don't buy it for keeping time.
yes. In the same way, you don't buy a phone to talk to someone. That's a very interesting concept in the fourth industrial revolution, that things that you used for a specific purpose changes. That purpose is still there. You can still use it for that. You can still see the time on a watch, but you actually buy it for something completely different. That's an interesting insight. And do you see that accelerating?
I think that in each industry, there will be devices that loses its original purpose and gains new purposes. But I believe that this concept of a connected home will bring more similarity in the model than ever before. So that people will pay for the features of the device they buy rather than its function.
Explain that a little bit
again,
further for me.
I think you've said it. When last did you check, when you go and buy a new phone, how good its voice channel is?
No, you don't.
Like, I don't think anyone tests the phone to see if it can call.
No.
But we still call it a phone, funny enough. It's still an iPhone. And we give the primary name to the voice channel. But I think in my own cases, I don't think I've used my phone for more than 10 minutes last month to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, manufacturers has to understand what the product is they're building. So if everyone was building good voice phones today, I don't think you'll be around.
Mm-hmm.
While people who build phones that has great mobile services is really where the success lie. And if you think of classic Apple, Apple's value, yes, the hardware is important, but the iCloud behind it and Siri and music and Apple TV is really the benefit you get from joining the community. Mm-hmm. And the device kind of fades into the background. And I think as voice control becomes more prevalent, many of these devices is going to disappear completely. And you'll actually only use the service rather than knowing what device it is connected to.
So that sort of, in a practical sense, means you walk into your kitchen and you say, I'd like a cup of coffee, and the kettle will start the boiling process.
Better is that the kitchen see when you wake up so that it has the coffee at the right temperature when you walk in.
That's a major advantage.
And we think of that as new, but we've been doing it with geysers probably for the last 10 years, where they switch themselves on when you're in the house and they switch themselves off when you're not in the house. So in more and more of those examples just will become part of our environment, is that the things we move and use in our home will become aware of how they can work for us, instead of us having to tell them how to work. How we monetize that is going to be a completely different issue.
I see you've got that on your mind, because I suppose in your new role as CEO of Media 24, that's important to think about, is how do you monetize that excellence in journalism and excellence in media that used to have a very clear way, very simple way of monetizing, and now there's a discovery process, I suppose, on how to monetize that excellence in journalism going forward.
Yeah, and I think media is very pertinent at the moment, because I don't think any of us wants to have a world without free media, and media that looks and talk about the environment we live in our communities. But it's not just journalism. I think any business model today has to become more complex. The days of making money in a specific way and charging a little bit more each year is long gone. So I think any business you're in, you have to continuously think of new and diverse revenue streams. because I think the luxury of inflationary increases for the service you charge is long gone. And if you're still in a business that does that, you're going to run out of runway. So whether you're in banking, mobile services, media, entertainment, you'll have to come up with new and innovative ways to diversify your revenue.
Sure. That's a lot you said there in a couple of sentences, but it goes to the importance of being aware, I suppose. So somebody who's thinking about entering university, maybe a high school student thinking about going to university 2 or 3 years hence, how do you recommend young people like that think about ensuring that they can contribute effectively in this rapid changing new world that you've just described?
I think one of the most valuable lessons you can learn or prepare yourself with is to learn how to work with groups and other people. This world we're in is so complex that the days of experts, well, there's very few experts left. And if I look at the teams I work with, the successful businesses hasn't been a great product or amazing marketing campaign. It's always been groups and teams that continuously design and adjust the products and services we take to market. So I think if I study today, those group works and team projects, I think that's probably the most valuable thing you can learn, is to understand how to work with other people to create something that you can offer to customers. Very few people today can design and make something on their own. It's all about how you work with other people and how you interact with your customers. I think it's a luxury today to design something and sell it. Nowadays, you have to talk to customers, understand what they want, and then build it. So for me, learning how to work with teams and groups of people is probably the key bit. And then experiment. Like if you've been using something too long, make a point and change your brand, change the product you use. Don't be the guy who gets stuck on video when everyone has moved to streaming. And I think that's part of conditioning, is that we grow attached to business models more than products. And if you don't adjust your own business model frequently, you will miss the change.
Sure. So students, business leaders, society, government is being challenged in a more rapid way, continuously, within this technologically driven future.
Yeah, and it is scary in many ways, but I think it also creates huge opportunities, especially for young people, because I think they grew up with this pace of change. And it's less scary for someone that has lived through this as a teenager and a young adult than for people that used to have jobs and careers that went over long periods before major changes happened. And I think as a young adult in a technology company today, they're probably better equipped than any of us could be. Because if you look at what university life is, this year you're going to be a virtual student.
Yes.
You still have to be a student. I'm not sure if you did this 30 years ago, what the outcome would have been.
Yeah, that's a very pertinent point in the COVID-19 era, because what you said about education, specifically higher education, is that has gone almost completely virtual in 2019 around the world. And what you said about teams and working into teams and working as part of groups, that's also gone kind of virtual. I'm sure you're working basically virtually all the time at the moment, right?
And it's amazing how, if you gave me a project a year ago and said, run a large technology, high security company with everyone working from home, it would have taken us 5 years to design. We would have done like 17 tests. And yet we managed to do it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I think large corporates that has resisted this for years suddenly figured out they could do it. And 2 weeks later, we were running things that historically required thousands of people in one room from home, and not even from remote working spaces. If I look at the teams I worked with, there were kids running in the background and dogs participating in meetings. So we literally learned in a very, very short time how to run entire companies from people's living rooms and dining rooms.
That's incredible.
And look, it's not been easy, and I don't think it's been flawless, but banks still operates today, telcos operates, media company operates. So I definitely think we can change much sooner if we have the motivation to do it.
Do you think this is going to last? I saw something that The Economist wrote about a while ago, and if I remember correctly, they looked at the worldwide impact of that change that we've been talking about now, working virtually, and they reckoned, if I remember correctly, that up to about 40% of work that used to be done in offices will never go back to the office. What is your view on this COVID-19 era's impact on how or where you work from could permanently change?
I'm very careful to make predictions of the future. I think that this will have let me rephrase it. This has definitely showed us what can be done.
Mm.
So we don't need people to all work from the same geographic location to have a successful service. I would like, however, to see a world where I can still meet my colleagues and I can still walk into a room with my team and do a whiteboard exercise. So I hope what we take from this is flexibility rather than a new model. I think some teams like working together and we should allow that to happen. While in other roles, people are more productive if they could do it from home and they could do it for a period from home and then come into the office. Mm. So I really hope that this has showed us that it can be done and challenge business leaders to allow flexibility in the model that they run their company. But yeah, I definitely don't want a world where I never work with other people in the same physical location. I think we will lose out and miss a lot of what makes businesses fun and unique to work in.
Sure. So a lot of people are also talking about a hybrid model. That's what you've just explained. Sort of when it's required, when you're brainstorming, when it's appropriate, people get together. But on a given Monday morning, you don't have to arrive at the office at 8:30 and be there. You could be it could be a hybrid model where there's flexibility, as you've said.
Yes, and I think hybrid based in time, but also geographical space. I hope this stops everyone having to live in a big city to work for a company. And I think this has showed us that we can run these hubs from smaller towns as successful as we do it from big cities. And it allows people to have more choices geographically where they work from as well.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Thanks very much for the discussion. It's drawing to a close now. It's very interesting. Whenever I have these conversations about the fourth industrial revolution on behalf of the University of Johannesburg, UJ, I always run out of time because there's so much, interesting things to discuss. Just on a last point, perhaps, in your role as Media24 CEO of Digital, can you perhaps give us a little bit of a glimpse what the community can expect, the South African society from one of South Africa's most prominent media entities? Can you share any new plans with us, or is it a bit too much to ask?
I don't think I'm in a position to share plans yet, but I think we've always looked at ways to enable great journalism. And I think going forward, technology must play a role in enabling great journalism rather than this becoming a technology play. So I hope to be part of that team that finds way to not only enable but sustain great journalism through the use of technology. But at the end of the day, that journalists who write the story and investigate must still be what makes journalism special and something that I think society needs to retain.
Thank you. No, that's very true, and thanks for that sentiment. It's very important coming from somebody like you, who may just from your CV veer to technology. It's great to hear that what's actually important is the science and art of journalism, and that certainly that it sounds as if that is what technology can enable, rather than, you know, for technology's sake, but for the sake of great journalism. Thanks for that. I've been chatting to Len Pienaar, the CEO of Media 24 Digital, and it's been a very enlightening discussion about the practical impact of the fourth industrial revolution. And I'm listening to Len's expert opinions. It sounds as if we're in for a time of great change, but also great opportunity. Thank you for chatting to us today, Len.